The low risk one doesn't exist. JP Morgan hasn't issued the JP Morgan dollar.
When it comes to publicly traded companies that own Bitcoin, one firm totally dominates. And it's not Tesla or Square or Coinbase. It's Microstrategy, a publicly traded company based in Virginia that provides business intelligence, mobile software, and cloud computing. It owns about 2.5 times as much Bitcoin as the next closest company. The reason Microstrategy is so long on Bitcoin is because its 57-year-old billionaire CEO, Michael Saylor, had an epiphany during the summer of 2020.
I think that the best money that we had for 10,000 years was gold, but we know that gold is imperfect money and we can trace thousands and thousands of wars to it, and we can trace tens of thousands of stories of people that saved their money in gold to have it seized or lost. If you go back to before Bitcoin, parts of the world had assets that they could use to store economic value, maybe the United States and Europe. But there are parts of the world like South America and Africa that not in thousands of years have actually had proper property rights or proper monetary assets. So their life has been hopeless. They continue to struggle. There are like 10 currency collapses in Argentina over the course of 200 years. The Russian currency collapsed in 1998. Right, so I think if we look at the history of modern currencies, right, the US dollar is the winner in every war in the 20th century, and it's lost 99.7% of its value in 90 years, and is on track to lose 99.9% of its value in 100 years. That's the best one, right? So every other one was worse than 99.9%. I think the second quarter of 2020, the policy response to the pandemic was to lock down most of the economy in the world. Main Street shut down. And the monetary response was to lower interest rates to zero and start pumping money into the economy through asset purchases, and to loosen bank loan lending restrictions, lower the reserve ratio. And that happened everywhere in the world. So we had a massive monetary stimulus while we had a massive fiscal contraction. And you saw something which, I kind of view as perverse, which is the stock market recovered to an all-time high at the time when the economy was the most dysfunctional in our lifetime. And so in the year 2020, you could say if you were a Wall Street company and if you did nothing for the entire year, you had the best year of your life, you were up 30%, you made a fortune. You could have hung out for the entire year on a floaty at your house in the Hamptons, done absolutely nothing, and you're 30% richer. And if you're a Main Street company, it was, first of all, you were almost regulated out of existence, so you couldn't operate. Am I worried about regulation? No, I think it's impossible that the automobile or electricity or airplanes would be deployed broadly in society without speed limits, traffic lights, certificates of occupancy, elementary safety. Every single building in civilization, right, there's a fire inspection before you move into it. So will regulation help or hurt in the adoption of buildings and in the adoption of fire? I think the answer is, if you're an engineer, the definition of a mechanism is the degrees of freedom just slightly more than the degrees of constraint. But you have to have constraints, because if I have 18 degrees of freedom, the thing flops around, it doesn't work. I need 2, 1. Right? I need 3 degrees of freedom. And so regulations are degrees of freedom in order to create mechanisms in a civilization. And right now, we probably don't have enough. And the fact that we don't have enough creates incredible fear and anxiety. And that causes public figures and public investors to pause. Everything that I can see about the regulatory environment implies that the regulators are actually pretty well informed. They recognize the innovations that exist. If you parse every word by Gary Gensler for the past 5 years, what he said is Satoshi's innovation is real. He recognizes the existence of decentralized digital property that is not a security. He said that there is a place for a stable coin, a digital currency. He's implying that the world would like dollars to circulate on some kind of crypto system. He's implied that trading 24/7, 365 is an advance. Technology is good. And if you offer a security to the general public, you have a duty of transparency to them so they can make a rational decision. What cryptocurrency is compliant? The President's Working Group paper implied that the preferred stablecoin dollar would be issued by an FDIC-insured bank. That's what they would like. There is no FDIC insured bank currently issuing stablecoins. So the investment grade blue chip cryptocurrency is an ideal that does not exist in the real world. There's a second tier of currencies, call them rated currencies. It would be like Paxos and Circle. And they are backed by cash and cash equivalents and the like, but they're not issued by FDIC insured banks. They're issued by licensed money transfer agents or licensed entities that are recognized in the US, but they're a second tier. So third tier, they're unrated cryptocurrencies like Tether. They're backed by something, and they give you a broad bucket of what the something is. Or even a stable coin like DAI or UST, they're backed by something. What is that something? They're not audited. It's unclear. They're not transparent. They all look like dollars. The low risk one doesn't exist. JP Morgan hasn't issued the JP Morgan dollar. Meanwhile, the world has a multi-trillion-dollar appetite for crypto dollars. And the fundamental difference between digital energy and digital information is encapsulated colloquial in the phrase, Satoshi solved the double spend problem. Like, that's the lowbrow thing to say. But an engineer would say, Satoshi figured out how to implement conservation of energy in cyberspace. The difference between me sending you the MP3 file and me sending you the Bitcoin file is the Bitcoin had $1 billion on it, and when I sent it, I lost it. But when I sent you the MP3 file and it had Beethoven's Fifth Symphony on it, I kept it, and I could send it 1 million more times an hour. So information is non-conservative. Energy is conservative. Bitcoin represents conservation of energy. So what is the universe? The universe is made of energy. What is matter? Matter is energy. You're a low frequency ball of energy. You'll last on this earth 100 years, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The human race is vibrating. Going to a disco in New York City, and okay, you're walking into an establishment in a universe which is 14 billion years old, and you know the universe is oscillating at 1 every 14 billion years. The sun's 4.5 billion years old. The earth about that. The continent's 400 million years old. The schist rock underneath Manhattan somewhere between 200 and 400 million years old. The Hudson River 20,000 years old. The building you're walking into 100 years old. The company that runs the party 10 years old. The party been lasting for 3 or 4 years. The customer experience is an hour. You're listening to music that's oscillating on audible frequencies while you see light. Okay, so they're all different energy at different frequency. Everything is different frequency. Once you see it that way, what you realize is that Bitcoin is digital energy. What is digital property? It's low frequency energy. What is property? What is a house? It's low frequency money. I give you $1 million, you want to save it for 20 years. If you keep it in fiat currency, you won't have any money in 20 years. You put it to a house, you'll have it. But on the other hand, how fast can you vibrate a house? It takes you a decade, it takes you 2 decades to change a house back and forth. If the digital information revolution was worth 10 to 30 trillion dollars to the human race, or some number like that, the digital energy revolution is an order of magnitude more. Right? If I said to you, you have a choice. You can give up all the money in the world, everything you have and everything you're ever gonna have, or you can let me delete your photos off your iPhone. Which of them is more important to you? If you have any segment of the economy and you leave it to the free market, then you have lots of actors, individual consumers and corporations that are constantly reorganizing themselves in a market economy in order to solve for the best solution for the lowest cost. And whenever the government interferes with that market and regulates it or advocates a particular outcome, they're interfering with the free market. So as the government encroaches on free markets, invariably the market would have chosen a different thing. If the market was going to choose the same thing the government was going to choose, the government wouldn't need to involve itself.